This weekend we hear about the Father and Christ, and the Father coming and dwelling with us, and how Jesus says that I plan to reveal, or I do reveal to all of you, the love of the Father. And that's an interesting concept. We know we struggle sometimes to really wrap our arms around what that is, because we don't experience a lot of times perfect love. We can experience people's attempts at love and certainly the love that they have, but we really struggle because we don't have a lot of experience with that perfect love that the Father has for us and that Christ seeks to bring to us and to allow us to access once again. We had turned from the Father's love as a race, as people, as human beings. Christ comes and allows us to once again have access to that perfect love that the Father has in the gospel. But again, many of us struggle to understand that, or struggle, not that we can ever fully understand it, but we struggle in general to believe that the Father is perfect love for us. And a lot of times that's because our association of the word Father is imperfect. We have earthly fathers, and we have priests, and so on and so forth, who attempt to show us or to image the love that God the Father has for us. But those earthly attempts do not fully convey that perfect love that the Father has for us. And in fact, the attempt to get us to not understand that was really the mission of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I was listening to a beautiful reflection this week about the Garden of Eden, and it was talking about how whether or not there was an apple involved, that doesn't really matter. And it really wasn't to get Eve to eat the apple. The ultimate goal of the devil in the Garden of Eden was to get us to think that God might in fact be not perfect love, but a tyrant. I'll say it again, that God is not perfect love. God the Father is not perfect love, but in fact may be a tyrant. And even if he can just get us to doubt God's perfect love for us, then he's already made a small victory with us. We have become a small victory for him. And I think that that's such an important point for us to reflect on. Do we believe that God is a tyrant, or that God is perfect love? There is no in between. Either God is who he says he is, or he is a liar. I think that's a really important thing, again, to sit with and to process. Do we think God is telling the truth all the time, or does God lie? Does he get us, does he say, if you do these commandments, if you follow my commandments, as he says in the gospel, then we will be happy? Or do we think that God is actually a tyrant who's getting us to follow commandments and jump through hoops for some other reason? That really is the fundamental question that we have to wrestle with, and that is the fundamental question that the devil wants us to not pay attention to. Most people believe and view God as some form of tyrant. Now, we wouldn't say that because we know that's the wrong answer on Jeopardy, but we operate that way. We think of God as somebody who's coming to take things from us, to make us less happy, to make us oppressed, to squash us. And that, in viewing God that way, the devil has achieved his greatest victory. Because then we're less likely to view him as perfect love, and so we're less likely to want to do the things that he asks of us. Because again, we think he's trying to trick us. This is related to the point that St. Peter makes in the second reading. St. Peter says a very beautiful line, and something that I think we also do well to reflect on. St. Peter says that we always should be ready to give a reason for our hope. Always be ready to give a reason for our hope in God. Now, if we view God as a tyrant, if we view him as a tyrant, then we don't have hope in God. That's real important. If we view him as a tyrant, then we don't actually hope in God. Because God is then simply, if he is that tyrant, then he's simply someone who's getting us to jump through hoops and who, for us, is viewed as a burden. And so when someone would say to you, either directly or indirectly, they may not ask you, but they may be watching you or listening to how you speak at work or at school or with your friends or wherever it might be. When they ask directly or indirectly, why do you have hope in God? If they see that we view him as a tyrant, then they'll get the message right away and they won't maybe even need to ask us the question in words. Why do you have hope in God? And can you explain it to someone? If someone asked you and came up to you on the street or at work or at school, would you be able to say, I have hope in God because blank? And I can answer that question from my own perspective. And the way that I answer that question gets back to the gospel as well. But I would tell people that I have hope in God because I've realized that he has always in my life told the truth. He has always in my life told the truth. When God has said in my life, if you do these things, you will be happy, when I've done them, I am happy. I am better off. And when God has said, don't do these things because they'll make you miserable, when I've done them, I've been miserable. And that is the reason that I have hope. I have hope because I have never experienced God telling a lie. And everything that he has said, I have experienced it to be true. I have failed to live up to that. I have failed at times to live up to the standard that God asks me to live at, which is that of a saint. I have failed, but I at least know that when I failed, it hasn't been God's fault, it's been mine. And that in fact, that it has made me miserable. And again, when I've done the things that God has said, I have been happy. And especially that has been true, I guess, for me in the experience of the sacraments. Christ has said, I am present to you, I come to you through the church, through the sacraments. And I have experienced Christ changing me through the sacraments. Now the problem is a lot of people come in and they want, they're like, well, I'll try this church thing. And they'll come in for 3 minutes, or they'll come one weekend, or they'll come every other weekend, or they'll come once a month. They cut themselves off because they're not giving God an opportunity. God works on us over time, and I've noticed when I look back on my life, as imperfect as I have been, that God has kept his commandments and his promises and has changed me for the better. Again, not as good as I would like, not a saint, but I've known again that it's been my fault and my turning away that has kept me from that. And I at least know that that is why I have hope. Because God has kept his word every time. How do you view God? Do you view him as a tyrant, or do you view him as perfect love? And when someone asks you why you have hope in God, what is your answer? What is your experience? What is it that allows you to have hope in him and to put your trust in him? May we have an answer for those who ask us that question.